Okay, so we should be going live shortly. Probably live already. I think so. So, guys, welcome. This is a bit of a Q&A we're going to be doing. We weren't able to do the podcast last night, so instead we're going to be doing this Q&A today. And hopefully that can kind of cover some of the things we won't get a chance to talk about because we weren't able to do the podcast last Sunday. But a lot has happened, so there's definitely stuff to talk about. Today, Nintendo Switch Oled was officially announced and confirmed. We're going to be talking about that for quite some time tonight, I imagine. We'll also probably touch on Breath of the Wild 2 and Metroid Dread. They were in the trailer as well. And there were also some recent Donkey Kong rumors that I haven't really been able to touch on at all. And I didn't put this in the description or the title, but we'll probably talk about Pokemon as well. But this is a Q&A, right? These are things I plan on talking about, but since this is a Q&A, you guys can ask me pretty much anything and I will answer it to the best of my ability, provided it's appropriate, you know. So if you can pretty much ask me anything. It doesn't have to be about games, but you know, there are certain things that would be kind of ridiculous, like for example something that might cause me to get demonetized or something. But I think most of you will get my point. But yeah, feel free to go to town with any sort of questions you like. We can make it interesting. We can just talk about Nintendo and all the theories and speculation and news. That's totally fine. But yeah, that's pretty much the plan for tonight. I'm not sure how long we're gonna go for. It kind of depends on how I'm feeling in the flow of things, but that's pretty much the plan. So if yeah, that's pretty much it. Normally I have a guest on, right? Because it's not the podcast, it's the Q&A instead. But guys, let me know in the chat if everything's looking and sounding okay. I'd really appreciate that. Let's see here, who's already in the stream? So I see Nishant Kalkar, hello. Paul Doon, hello there. Duncan Corrigan, it's a morning for you. Good morning. And for me, it is the evening. Yeah, no, it right now it is 9:13 p.m. for me. I got back home from work like at 8:47. Yeah, 8:47. So I had to get things ready. I had some things semi-ready beforehand, so it didn't take me that much additional work to get this stream going. But yeah, I was in a little bit of a rush to get things going. That's why I said about 9 when I tweeted about it earlier, just because I have a day job, and sometimes the day job, it's not a clear-cut sort of time I get to leave because I have to close down the shop and things can occur. But yeah, I think we were able to get things started at a decent time, so I'm not too disappointed with that. Alex Too Cheesy, heyo. Ev Kirk, what do you think about the name Switch Oled? All right, so first question. Yeah, so great first question. What do I think about the name Switch Oled? It's it is what it is. It's just like, hey, this is a Switch and it has an OLED screen. Here you go. It's very clear cut. I'll tell you, I actually think it's a fairly smart name. They're not trying to do. It is what it is. It's Switch Oled, and with that, you know, okay, this has an OLED screen. That's like the big draw for this system, and it is an improvement. Reconnection successful. Okay, it looks like the stream just went out randomly. Are you guys still there? Let me know. Is it working now? Oof, that is okay. So it looks like the stream went out there for a little bit. That's unfortunate. I have no idea why. No idea why. Yeah. That was a random thing to just kind of go out like that. But, oh well. As I was saying, though, just going back to the question, yeah, Switch Oled, I think is a fine name just because it's very clear on what it is. And that's pretty much with that one. Duncan Corrigan, I reckon the parentheticals mean it'll just replace base model and be referred to as just a Nintendo Switch. That is an interesting point, and actually let me go ahead and kind of share with you Nintendo's website here. Yeah, I mean, that's what they just call it. The Nintendo Switch, and then in parentheticals OLED model. It's not necessarily like, I mean, if you look here, it does show like the. Can you guys see what I'm pointing at? You can see the top there. It shows the 3 different categories, right? So it does consider it like a separate system from the base Nintendo Switch. But to your point, at some point or another, they could drop those parentheticals and it could phase out the base Switch model. That is totally a possibility. Yeah, I can see that happening. Where is it? There we go. Oops, sorry. Yeah, so let's see here. I should probably pop out the chat, that way I can see that more clearly. All right, there we go. So, oh, this is okay. Now I got it full screened here. So let's see, where was I in the chat? Oh, Paul Dunn. Okay, it's pronounced like Dunn, so Dunn. Okay, I got you, Paul Dunn. Thank you. Swift SVT, hello there. Birdman, hello. Guy you don't know, hello. Game walkthroughs, hello there. Metroid Prime, in the flesh itself. Well, welcome to the chat. DE Fox, hello. I'm a sandwich. Who else is going to wait for a Zelda Edition OLED Switch to get one? An interesting consideration there. For sure. There could be like a Breath of the Wild sort of edition later on. Kind of, you know, gets me thinking to like, we look at that trailer, right? They open it with Metroid Dread, which is highly fascinating for a number of different reasons. But then shortly after, they show off a few different shots from the recent Breath of the Wild 2 trailer. And it's interesting to me because that game's not coming out anytime soon. Well, I say anytime soon. At the very earliest, like literal earliest possible is February. But that is, I would say, really unlikely. March might happen. But then going beyond, but I feel like given how much they showed us for Breath of the Wild 2, I'm not really expecting it till the holiday. So, you know, the fact they showed off in this trailer does get me thinking, oh, maybe it isn't that far off, right? Now, they also showed off Splatoon 3, right? And that game's coming out sometime in 2022, but we don't know when in 2022. Conceivably, it could come out for March 2022. It could be summer 2022. It could be maybe even later into the year. But I feel like at that point, that's a little bit of a stretch for that game. I think that's coming out sooner than later. So it's just kind of interesting how they included Breath of the Wild 2 and Splatoon 2 and Pokemon Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl and Metroid Dread in the marketing for this trailer. And I guess the main point here is that those are kind of like the big sort of known Nintendo games that are right around the corner, give or take a year, I suppose. So yeah, I think that's probably it. It's probably not like a hint that Breath of the Wild 2 is coming out this March, but it's not out of the question either. So, you know, just something to think about. Let's see here. Moving on with the chat. Tonight's all chat, by the way. So we're just I'm relying on you guys to carry this conversation. There's things I want to talk about, but I feel like you guys are going to ask me questions that will touch on all of those things. David Haney, hello everybody. It's not the Pro. So we put out a video earlier today. I don't know if you guys saw it, but when I say we, I mean me. I realize sometimes I speak about myself in third person when it comes to like announcing things, and some of that is because, well, there's Cardboard Charmander, right? And so occasionally he's in for little skits in the beginning. Sometimes it's because, you know, I'm working on something with Brandon, right? And then sometimes just because, I don't know, it's just the collective thought process of the community here, right? But yeah, anyway, I put out a video earlier today, right before I had to go into work, that was just, you know, talking about this Switch OLED situation and kind of asking, is this the Switch Pro or is it not, right? And to what you're saying it's not. And I'm not as certain with that. I have heard some people saying, oh, it's coming out 2022, but it's kind of one of those things where it does feel a little bit like a goalpost moving situation. And I'll tell you, before the announcement of this system, I wasn't in that camp at all. I mean, if you guys have been following me for a while, you know that I've been adamant that a Switch revision is coming this year. I believe that, and it is. But I've also supported the idea that it will have 4K functionality. And that may still happen next year, right? I'm not trying to say that it's not happening next year. I'm simply saying that I'm not as confident as I am in what was going to happen this year. Now, this year isn't exactly what I expected either, right? But it was an enhanced revision, a more expensive SKU for the Nintendo Switch. That did happen, and we were right about the timing. It would come out October. Granted, I was thinking maybe Breath of the Wild 2 would be that launch title, but instead it's Metroid Dread, which I'm totally fine with. And it makes sense because it's not a 4K system. This is actually more of a system that enhances like the handheld experience. And Metroid Dread is like taking that side-scrolling Metroid gameplay and bringing it to the highest level it's ever been. So I do feel like it's kind of fitting to improve upon the handheld experience better than Nintendo has ever had it. Bringing that OLED, improving the tabletop features, that's all nice. But at the same time, you look at like the dock improvements as well with the actual Ethernet port, like that is important. Like that's going to improve online play and downloads and things of that nature, perhaps cloud streaming as well. There's a number of things with this system that I think do enhance the overall experience. Now, I'm not saying it's worth buying a whole other system for, but, you know, for some people it is. But to answer the question, or it wasn't even necessarily a question, it was you were just making a statement, but I think that the reports from Bloomberg and Eurogamer that got everyone hyped up and excited shortly before E3, those sort of reports were alluding to a system coming out this year, an enhanced version coming out this year. And I think there may have been some error in there's always, it's never perfect, right? So you always got to take it with a grain of salt, even if it's a very, very good source like Eurogamer or Bloomberg. But, you know, they were right about the system coming out and having some enhancements. Like we've talked about some of those things. The 7-inch screen, that was been long reported with the OLED, that's all been long reported. The very wide panel for the kickstand, that's been reported as well. We've talked about that on the channel. The Ethernet adapter as well. Those are all sort of things that were expected. The missing key here is the 4K functionality, the DLSS support, the means to sort of upscale games to 4K when it's on the television. Now, if they had that feature, I'd imagine this would be a $400 system, and it seems like that's not exactly what Nintendo's doing. But ultimately, my video where my point was that I think to an extent that this is a Switch Pro, because a lot of what the reports were alluding to is this system. But at the same time, there is some errors with those reports. Not everything's entirely true. It just lead one to sort of think, is there still something else out there, right? And there's already a whole bunch of people saying that right now, and that could still be happening. But it gets interesting because when you also take into consideration the timing of things, we're in uncharted territory. So if you look at the Switch as like just a handheld system, it's not out of the question to see different types of revisions. But we are just getting a more expensive, higher quality, like enhanced version of the Switch now. To think that we'll be getting an even more expensive, even better version of the Switch just a year from now, to me, feels like a little bit of a stretch. But I know a lot of people right now are arguing, well, you know, there's been all these reports of the 4K, there's some good insiders out there, and it may still be happening. Maybe Nintendo feels like they can get away with it. Maybe they'll put out a price drop. Maybe there'll be some sort of ambassador program. There's a number of different ways Nintendo could sort of market and push things to where all of a sudden a year from now, exactly a year from now, say for the holidays, say November comes out with Breath of the Wild 2 and they have a special 4K Switch that also has the OLED in there. Like, they could conceivably do that and also have a price drop, bring down this Switch OLED to 300, phase out the base Switch by that point, still have Switch Lite. Like, that's all possible. But Nintendo's gonna have to do a great job of sort of maneuvering around with the marketing and the politics and making fans feel like they made a worthwhile investment. Because if I buy this Nintendo Switch Emmy Edition this October, and then basically 12 to 13 months later, Nintendo announces another one, or even before that, that to me is going to be a little upsetting. I don't want to put down $350 for this Switch only to have to feel compelled to put down another $400 12 months later. And of course you could argue, well, Nintendo wants your money. Why wouldn't they get you to do that, right? Well, but also I'm a hardcore Nintendo fan, but there's going to be a lot of other people that will feel a little burned by that. A lot of people may look to this as like the in-hand Switch and pick this up, and they may not necessarily look at the other Switch. Now, it really comes down to how they push things and how they market things and the messaging. I'm not saying it can't be done. It's just, it seems a little bit more challenging now for that to happen. Like if this Switch OLED model was $300 and they phased out the Switch this year and they still had Switch Lite at $200, then I could see a Switch Pro coming out next year. Like that would be a little easier for me to sort of like believe with more confidence. But because it's a more expensive version, I'm skeptical. Now, I'm not so skeptical to say that it's like a 0% chance or a 5% chance. It might be like a 30-40% chance that we still get this Switch Pro. But right now I'm erring on maybe not. But it's hard to say, because you could also make the argument that we're already close to the point where it's like, okay, it's time for like the next generation, right? Because historically speaking, most Nintendo hardwares have about a 5-year life cycle. Sometimes they're around closer to 4, sometimes they're around closer to 6, but the average is about 5. Now, as we've gone closer, more and more to the future, it seemed like Nintendo's more willing to extend those life cycles. Look at the Wii and look at the Nintendo 3DS. But of course, also the Wii. Well, the Wii was a failure, so of course they try to get away from that as quickly as possible. But it's seeming like nowadays, if you especially look at the competition, it is more likely that systems have longer life cycles. So March 2022 will be hitting that the 5-year anniversary. If by holiday 2022 we get a 4K Switch, would that be okay? I mean, maybe. And then maybe 2 years after that, we get a next-gen Switch in, like, holiday 2024. Like, it's not out of the question, but also 2 years after a 4K Switch, which is a year after Switch OLED, which is already more expensive, that might be asking a little bit too much from the fan base there. So I'm not saying it can't happen, right? I'm just simply saying there's a lot of things Nintendo has to sort of maneuver around in marketing and how exactly they go about doing this. Maybe this Switch Pro or this 4K Switch that's still rumored and talked about by insiders, maybe it's a situation where it's more of a blurred line situation. As we've talked about in a few different videos, and we've all talked about on Rob's channel and Nintendo Prime's channel as well, Rule to Review and Nintendo Prime, we speculated that maybe this 4K DLSS Switch is whatever that is. It's obviously not coming out this year. It's something that will somewhat function as a mid-gen refresh, but also maybe be like a hybrid of a next generation. And wouldn't be something that's really been done before by Nintendo or really anyone that I can think of at this point. I mean, there were some arguments that maybe Xbox Series X, not Xbox Series X, Xbox One X was kind of like that, but not really, because it's just strange. It's very strange. But I've been ranting. Let me get into the chat here and just kind of we'll be coming back to this. But that's just kind of like some of my thoughts about this whole situation regarding Switch Pro, Switch Pro not. Hard to say. Let's see here. Burman, so what next up is Nintendo Switch 4K model? They could straight up call it Nintendo Switch 4K. The messaging is very clear, it's very clean, it's very neat, and it would work. If that is the main thing about the system, then yes. Now, the problem with that, though, is that if that's what you do, and there's a handheld mode that's not in 4K, that would arguably be a little bit misleading, right? So maybe the naming wouldn't be quite that, but it's definitely a possibility. Giancarlo, sorry, Anime, do you think Nintendo could reveal the rumored 2.5D Donkey Kong game and the next mainline Kirby game in the fall Nintendo Direct? A great question, and the answer is absolutely, actually. So I'm not saying with 100% certainty at all that both of those games will be in a, say, September Nintendo Direct, but I think there's a good chance that they could. I'll tell you that I think with great confidence that there will be a Kirby announcement before the end of the year. I'm not saying it's going to be a big mainline Kirby. I'm actually kind of thinking more of like a smaller sort of thing, and it might even be something to help sort of support Nintendo Online potentially, which would line up with a September Nintendo Direct, because that's the time that Nintendo wants to sort of get people to reinvest into their Nintendo Online membership, because that's when that initial sort of set of memberships will expire, because Nintendo Switch Online came out September a few years ago. So every time around that time of the year, they usually do that. It's also why we usually get a September Nintendo Direct. It all kind of like comes together. Even like, for example, last year when we barely got Nintendo Directs, I believe we got this Mario 35th Anniversary Direct in September, and in there they announced Mario 99, which was something to benefit Nintendo Online members. So it was just kind of something else that they added to kind of keep people paying for that online membership. So, you know, I do think that there is a good chance that we're going to see announcements to support members for Nintendo Online that may include like an eShop title from Kirby. But I do also think there's probably a mainline Kirby game. I'm not sure how convinced I am that it would be announced during the Nintendo Direct, but it's one of the many games that Nintendo has in development that could be announced. So there's a whole bunch of them. There's the Donkey Kong thing that I believe. There is Bayonetta 3, which has been announced. We haven't seen too much of it. They could show off more Breath of the Wild 2. They could show off Prime Trilogy. They could show off Prime 4. They could show off... what the Mario Kart team's been working on, right? Monolith Soft could show off one of their big projects. There's quite a few options actually. But Donkey Kong, I think, makes a lot of sense. So the rumor, I believe this is coming from Zippo, right? Which, again, there was some questions to the legitimacy of what they were saying. Some things they said have come true, some things what they have said have not been true. But the gist of the rumor is that the game is very far into development alongside a Fire Emblem game as well. And also that there's an animation coming for this. So that's the rumor. But I'll tell you what I sort of think, just like logically and from what I've heard and seen and stuff. I, again, think with great confidence the new Donkey Kong game is around the corner. From what I've personally heard, I do believe it's far along. Which is why I thought E3 was a possibility for it to be shown off, but I was never convinced because, of course, I thought maybe it could be a 2022 game, and if it's announced during the September Nintendo Direct, that's when I would assume it would be coming out sometime in 2022. And they could show it off in September. I think the game's, from what I heard, I haven't seen anything, but I feel like, yeah, it could probably be shown off in the September Direct, and it would be coming out sometime next year. And that would be another awesome game to sort of bolster what's starting to appear to be a very epic-looking lineup for 2022, which kind of goes back to the Switch Pro thing. It feels that, because with all that strong software, maybe Nintendo does have something even bigger planned for next year, right, in terms of hardware. Like, it is still a consideration. But, yeah, I think Donkey Kong makes sense. Maybe they want to do something to sort of celebrate Donkey Kong's 40th anniversary, make some mention of it. They're not going to do it the day and date, because I think that's already passed already. But they're going to mentioning Donkey Kong to some extent, maybe a Donkey Kong 99, right, as well. Like, that's all a possibility for sure. Every fall Nintendo Direct, usually around September, we usually get a game or two, like fairly large games that are coming from Nintendo that are coming out the year afterwards. So Donkey Kong could be one of those games, for sure. I absolutely believe that. And I also do side with the idea that with Donkey Kong, Nintendo wants to bring it back to a greater level of popularity than it has been as during the 21st century. They want to bring it back to the prominence it was way back when. So Donkey Kong, I could be mistaken, but I want to say the initial release was 1981. I might be mistaken on that, but the gist here is that Donkey Kong was something that was created when Nintendo had a whole bunch of arcade cabinet. So I don't know if you guys have ever been to an arcade, because I understand that arcades are being phased out over time. I'm sure a lot of you have, but some of you may have not. But an arcade, it's where you play games in a public place, and they have like these sort of like cabinet things, a little monitor you could play on, right? So Nintendo had a whole warehouse of those back in the 80s. But the game was radar scope, something they had moderate success with back in the East. But they wanted to get into the West, and they weren't performing too well. So they figured they needed to do something different around that. And think about it, Donkey Kong, where do you think that's based off of, right? Well, they designed a game that they thought would appeal to Americans. So Donkey Kong was inspired from King Kong. And there's also the red girders. Like, it's all sort of relating to, like, New York City and King Kong. So that's kind of where some of the concepts behind Donkey Kong were born from, and they made that from the radar scope cabinets they already had in a warehouse. But anyway, that sort of ingenious, sort of creative idea for that game was opportune because it worked out. It did appeal to Americans, and the game went viral at the time, and it's what made Nintendo really establish themselves in the West, and then, the rest is kind of history. Point is, Donkey Kong is a very important part to the history of Nintendo. Without Donkey Kong, Jumpman would not have become Mario. Mario wouldn't be, the big mascot. There wouldn't be the Zeldas, the Metroids, the Kirbys, the Animal Crossings, the Pokemons. Like, all of that would not have happened if it wasn't for the initial Donkey Kong game. So there's certainly like an importance in terms of history, and maybe Nintendo would want to celebrate that. But the other point is that Donkey Kong's would put Nintendo on the map. Why can't they do it again? Why can't they do something with Donkey Kong to make it big again? Big like Mario. Donkey Kong used to be pretty big, and Donkey Kong has at least shown to have a stronger track history in terms of sales than Metroid. And Metroid right now is looking quite promising as well. So I think Nintendo wants to make Donkey Kong a big selling series. The same way they're pushing Metroid right now. Notice how Metroid Dread is a big part of the marketing for this Switch OLED system. It's coming out on the same day. It opened up the trailer. You go back to the E3. There are two different treehouse segments for Metroid Dread, the opening segment and the closing segment. There's a developer diary. There's all these social media tweets for Metroid Dread. And all this marketing is showing that the timing is right here because, well, there's a whole bunch of strong Metroid sales in the Wii U eShop, Amazon sales, GameStop sales. Metroid's doing really well. Donkey Kong has similar, if not greater, potential than Metroid. So I think Nintendo probably is going to try and revive another big franchise next year. The way they're reviving Metroid now, I think they're going to try and revive Donkey Kong so it can become another pillar or another strong franchise that they can rely on and have consistent sort of releases. The way we see the frequent Animal Crossings and Splatoons and Marios and Zeldas, I think Nintendo wants to get Metroid and Donkey Kong on a similar level. I'm not saying exactly, right, because some of those games sell incredibly well, but who knows? It's not out of the question either. It just may not be as likely that Metroid Dread sells 20 million, but if it sells 5, that's fantastic. If next Donkey Kong says 5 or 10 million, that's fantastic. Those are still incredible numbers. So I do believe that is Nintendo's plan to do that. In relation to the animation, we'll see. I want to see the Mario movie first before we start talking about Donkey Kong animations. But, that's just really just a rumor. And I know I've been ranting, guys, but these are all topics that I haven't been able to fully voice right now. Let's see here. Aaron Curdy provided a super chat. Thank you very much, Aaron. I didn't hype responsibly and got let down. So, okay. I'm sorry you were let down. But, yeah, exactly. Hype responsibly. You gotta take things with a grain of salt. But I tell you, like, I'm not sure if I should buy this Switch OLED because I just don't know if it's worth it, right? Because it's $350. I already have a Switch that's functioning fine. Okay, technically, I have a little hole in mine. I don't know how it got there, but it's in the back. I covered it with like a Zelda skin. And quite often, when I play in handheld, sometimes it starts making a really loud buzzing noise, like more than out of the ordinary when it's working hard. Like it sounds really, really loud. And if I close things out or I put into sleep mode for a little bit, it goes back to normal. If I play the game, it doesn't make that noise again for a little bit. Point is, my launch day Switch isn't perfect. My Joy-Con's a little wrecked. The right Joy-Con rumble doesn't work. And I might go get this Switch Emmy edition. So I really like the white and the black. I do need some new Joy-Cons. That screen looks pretty neat, and I'm not sure how much longer my Switch will last. Granted, it's had some of these issues for a while already, and it's still going. So, you know, it probably could stretch it for another couple of years. But the Nintendo fanboy in me, the Metroid fanboy in me, really kind of gets me kind of excited for Metroid Dread, obviously, but also this white Switch OLED. So let me kind of explain my point with the whole Emmy Edition thing. If you look at that Switch model, let me see here. Yeah, it's right here. I'll just show it on again for you guys on the stream. Like, it's beautiful. It's this white dock with these white Joy-Cons, and it reminds me of the Emmy from Metroid Dread, because the Emmy from Metroid Dread has the white plating and the black internals. It fits, and these things are coming on the same day. Metroid Dread and Switch OLED are coming on the same day, so Nintendo might just be trying to get me caught up in the hype here, and I may end up splurging way more money than I should. I don't need to spend any money because I have a functioning Switch, so maybe I shouldn't do it, but I'm definitely feel the pressure, right, as a Nintendo fan. But, you know, it's just beautiful. But I do understand your disappointment, though, in terms of it not being like a 4K system, but given the software lineup for this year, once we saw that E3, we saw that Breath of the Wild 2 wasn't coming out this year, it made sense that they wouldn't push that this year, because it's not the kind of games that would really need a 4K sort of system. Next year, though, the lineup's looking a little different, but at the same time, I'm not entirely convinced that we'll see it, but it's possible. So you may have to wait a little bit longer if you're really waiting for that 4K system. If this is not worth it for you, then don't get it. But, you know, I think it looks cool. Let me kind of get off this here. There we go. Okay. So let me see where I am with the chat here. Okay, hopefully the stream's still working now, guys. Okay, good. You guys were telling me it was good earlier. Sweet. Well, I got a chat jump. I've missed some things. Yo, Rob, what's up, man? How you doing? Hello there, ASAP Rel. ASAP Bro, I'm not gonna lie, this announcement disappointed me. I'm still getting it though. Wilma Dread, not 4K HDR, disappointed indeed. Yeah, some people are arguing that maybe we see it next year, but you know, it's fine. Ultimately, I just want games, and there are games for me to enjoy and play. Nishan Kelkar, have you played any of the Persona games? Persona 5 is one of my all-time favorite games, and one of the best on PlayStation 4, in my opinion. Persona 4 Golden on Steam is great, too. So, I haven't played Persona. I've been meaning to get to Persona 5. My roommate tried to get me to play it a few months ago. I didn't. But, you know, I am actually thinking that I'm going to jump on Shin Megami Tensei 5. I really liked how it looked during the Nintendo Treehouse, so I may pick that up. So it's technically not Persona, but their Persona and Shin Megami Tensei are linked, right? Because Persona came from Shin Megami Tensei. So at some point I may try Persona, but I may wait until I play SMT5 first. Game walkthroughs. What do you think is the next 3D Zelda game after Breath of the Wild 2? Great question. I don't know. But it's an exciting sort of like idea, because where would they go from there, right? One of the things that is sort of interesting when you kind of think about like the future of Zelda, most of the games take place in Hyrule, and it's looking like this sequel is also going to be in Hyrule. They will be expanding upon Hyrule in different ways, but it's still in Hyrule. So where do they go from here? Well, what did they do in Skyward Sword? Well, in Skyward Sword, still in Hyrule. It was just a much older Hyrule, and a lot of it took place in the sky. So, not too different from Breath of the Wild, actually. But then what about Twilight Princess? Well, it was in Hyrule. What about the Wind Waker? Well, it was in Hyrule, except this Hyrule had water covering everything, so it was an entirely different place to explore, right? What about Majora's Mask? Well, it was in Termina, so that was a different area. Ocarina of Time was that. But, you know, if you look at Ocarina of Time, the Twilight Princess, and Breath of the Wild, the more traditional sort of Hyrules, there's been such a gap in technology and time between those different games that and also time and history, that there's still a lot of changes with the environment. There's still a lot of different there that it's okay. But the follow-up to Breath of the Wild 2 in this modern era of like HD open world games, like what are they going to do with that? Is it going to be in a different region, or are they going to choose a different time in history where the world is very different? That's hard to say. It's very hard to say because you don't know, right? And I mean, I'm only talking about 3D Zeldas, but like if you look at Link Between Worlds, it's just sort of like a reimagining / different time period of Hyrule, but on the 2D side of things, right, from A Link to the Past. So Hyrule's usually there, it's just usually because of a different choice in art design and a sort of a reimagining of how the map would look at a different time period. That's usually how they get away with kind of always being in Hyrule, right? But then at the same time, look at the Mario games, they're usually set in the Mushroom Kingdom as well, but we usually just see different parts of it, sort of just reimagined in a different way. So there's a really good chance that once we get the next big Zelda game, which may be like by 2027, like it's probably going to be, it may be still in Hyrule, but it'll be envisioned in a way that'll be very different. I'll tell you that I would love to see a style that is semi-similar to the style that they used for the Wii U tech demo back in, I want to say, 2011. And it was based off the Twilight Princess sort of art design, but it looked very different with this in this tech demo. It was very whimsical, very sort of like surreal. Like there was a certain realism to it, but it still wasn't like realistic. It was just a very different look. And I would love to see something like that on a larger scale on another Nintendo system. In 5 years from now, 6 years from now, I'm sure Nintendo could pull it off with their newer hardware. I mean, that was actually a tech demo for the Wii U, so in theory they could have gotten a game to look kind of like that, in theory at least. So it would be really nice to see something like that in terms of how it looks. In terms of like locale, I wouldn't mind them going to a different location if we get another open world of the Hyrule itself and they expand upon the towns and side quests and characters you can sort of interact with. That way we actually get to sort of fully experience this world. At that point, I'd be okay with them moving on to a different environment. Maybe we go back to Termina. Maybe it's somewhere else. Maybe they pull from some of the map from Zelda 2, which is still Hyrule, but it's like an expanded Hyrule that has different kingdoms and areas and islands and such. Like, it'd be interesting to see them sort of explore some of that. So those are some of the options they could maybe go into doing. Or they could do something crazy, still make it in Hyrule, but like in the future, right? Where like there's like spaceships and skyscrapers and things like that, which would be very, very different. And people may not like that because, you know, a lot of people look towards Zelda as like sort of like a fantasy medieval sort of style, right? But, you know, maybe they can still find a way to fit that in there, you know? Or what if it's not in Hyrule at all? It's like an alien world, but it's still like a medieval alien fantasy world. How would that sort of work? Well, I don't know, but it might be interesting to see, right? So there are so many ways they can sort of go about doing things. But let me just kind of continue on here. Giancarlo, this Switch model is the equivalent of an XL model for Switch. Yeah, I would say that's not too far off, right? And then eventually they did launch the new 3DS XL. So you know what? In terms of timing, let's look that up. So the 3DS, I want to say, came out in 2010, right? The initial release date for 3DS was 2010. Okay, no, apparently early 2011. All right, so a little off there. February 2011. All right, good. I'm glad I looked that up. Okay. So early 2011 for the base 3DS. But what about the 3DS XL? When did that come out? Okay, well, this is saying the new Nintendo 3DS came out 2015. But I want to know about the 3DS XL. Like, yeah, before there was a newness added to it. Apparently that came out like a year and a half. It came out summer 2012. So that's interesting, right? And then you also have the 2DS, which that's a whole other beast. 2DS release. I think that was late into the system's life cycle. 2013, right? So yeah, the new 3DS in 2015, 2DS in 2013, XL in 2012, and the base in 2011. Interesting. But you see what they did. They started off early 2011, and then they went all the way until there were still games coming out in 2017. Let's see here. Yeah, rule of two review. Catching a little of the stream while working, busy day. No, it's been a very, very busy day. From waking up to the very end. Regular Dad here. Switch Pro is in the Nintendo Vault along with Metroid Prime Trilogy. Yes, it is. Apparently. I do think Prime Trilogy is real. DE Fox, thank you for modding, by the way. I'm still thinking we're getting Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD this year, and Nintendo lied as to not draw sales away from Skyward Sword HD. I don't entirely agree. I do believe Twilight Princess HD and Wind Waker HD are real. I mean, they already exist, but I do believe that they are coming to Switch. It's just the timing. I think timing-wise, I'm expecting them next year. Maybe. Expectation is a strong word. I think there's a chance that they can come out next year, and I could see them coming out early next year, actually, to sort of tide fans over until Breath of the Wild 2 comes out towards the end of 2022. It doesn't have to be Twilight Princess or Wind Waker. Maybe it's like an Ocarina of Time Majora's Mask HD. So like those are possibilities. How they time when these other games come out, that's gonna sort of depend, but I do believe that Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD for Switch are also involved alongside Prime Trilogy and maybe Switch Pro. Moving on here. Seahawks 24 rule. Hey, wow, did this just start? We started not too long ago. I would say like 9:10, 9:15ish, but then there was like the stream sort of like cut out for a moment, which sort of sucked. But yeah, we're still fairly early into this stream. Rules of review. I too think Zelda will be next holiday, though I wish it were sooner. Yeah, I think there's a small chance that Breath of the Wild 2 does come out March 2022. Small, okay? I'm not trying to build up expectations here, because I don't expect that right now. I'm expecting holiday. But the reason why I think there's a small chance is because I can see a situation where Nintendo wouldn't really market Breath of the Wild 2 too much because of Skyward Sword HD. Like, I can kind of see it. At the very least, it's very clear that what they showed off for Breath of the Wild 2 was sort of meant to hype up Skyward Sword HD. When you show Link falling through the sky like that, exploration in the sky, that's what Skyward Sword's all about. The link is very clear. Also, pun intended with Link. But like, even the animation when Link is falling is the same as it is in Skyward Sword. It's very, very similar, and I do not think it is coincidence. It is absolutely intentional. So there is like a shared marketing plan here. I do think Nintendo wants to use Skyward Sword to sort of reintroduce newer Zelda fans to the series' history. And that will play some sort of significance to Breath of the Wild 2, and it is going to help sort of to tide fans over until that game is ready. And it may also sort of acquaint fans to some sort of mechanics that may be returning in Breath of the Wild 2, like traditional style items and dungeons. Skyward Sword is one of the better games for that, so getting fans acquainted to that could sort of build up the fan base and prepare them for Breath of the Wild 2, which may be a little bit more of a mashup of what Breath of the Wild 1 was, but also of previous Zelda games as well, the 3D ones. So there could be that. But anyway, going back to my point, because I know I'm tangenting, I think there's a chance Nintendo might not be showing that much off for Breath of the Wild 2 because of Skyward Sword HD, and they still may want to have like a big sort of fiscal year ending kind of game, and Breath of the Wild 2 could be that game. But it also could be Splatoon 3. It also could be maybe 3D Donkey Kong. It also could be maybe none of those, and it's just something we don't know about. And they may not even have a big game to close out in March, right? They haven't done that every single March. Most Marches, at least as of late, they have, but not every single March. Legends Arceus is coming out in January. Maybe that's enough. Maybe they could have something smaller come out in February or March instead, right? So those are possibilities. I really feel like just because they didn't show us any footage, and the way they sort of announced that it was coming 2022, they said they were targeting 2022. Like, if you're targeting 2022, that's sort of leaving some room for, oh, this might not make it out. I think it is going to make it out, but the way that's being worded, it sounds like it's not like an early 2022 thing. It sounds like they're going to try and make it ready just in time for the holiday. That's what I'm sort of thinking right now. But I'll also tell you, seeing Breath of the Wild 2 in that Switch Pro trailer does make me... Switch OLED trailer, it makes me wonder, was there a plan beforehand for Breath of the Wild 2 to be the holiday game this year, but COVID derailed that entirely? Maybe also there was going to be a 4K Switch coming out this year, but COVID derailed that entirely. Maybe both those things are being pushed into the holiday of next year, and this year, to sort of tide things over, they have other things like Metroid Dread and WarioWare and Advance Wars and Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl and this Switch OLED. Like, maybe that is sort of Nintendo's plan here, and they will sort of do the cooler stuff, or I don't want to say cooler stuff, but bigger, more expensive stuff next year, right? That's possible, but right now, again, I'm expecting Breath of the Wild 2, probably closer to holiday, but we'll see. Let's see here. Holiday next year. Paul Dunn got it right. What do you think of the likelihood of us playing as a hero from 10,000 years ago in Breath of the Wild 2? I think it is... I don't want to say it's unlikely, but my impression is the Link we see in every part of that second trailer we got a few weeks ago is the same Link we played as in Breath of the Wild 1. I think some of the things that people are arguing are just kind of reading a little bit too much into it. We've seen shots even in the sky that sort of suggested it's still in the same time period. So there was an argument that you were going back in time for that. I think there is a culture that is ancient that you are ingratiating yourself with when you're in the sky. So there's certain elements that you may be studying or learning or wearing that will be from a different time, but you yourself are the Link from the current time. That's what I sort of think. But that Zonai hand that consumes Link, the magic there, that is likely some sort of ancient magic or technology, and that could be related to the hero from 10,000 years ago. They could sort of dive even deeper into that story of the previous Zelda and Link fighting the Calamity Ganon. Maybe that sources back to the source of this, which presumably is Ganondorf, the corpse we see in the trailer, the mummy-looking thing. So I do think there's going to be some history there. I don't know if it's specifically from 10,000 years ago, but there's definitely some history there. But I think more likely the Link we see in the trailer throughout the entire trailer, including the land and the sky, is the same Link from Breath of the Wild 1. Computer robots added me. Am I living in some alternative universe that Anders is finally streaming on a Tuesday? Now I'm really excited. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying the stream on a Tuesday. I'll tell you, this is more of a temporary thing, but at the same time, it might not be. So the podcast is still going to be a Sunday thing. I don't plan on changing that anytime soon. Nothing has made me think otherwise. But I am kind of experimenting here. Maybe if this Q&A goes well, maybe we'll try and do more in the middle of the week as well. Maybe that's kind of a way to kind of get a little bit more content out there. Because Q&As, there's not as much editing and planning involved. It's easier for me to stream than it is for me to make a video. But I like making videos, and I'm not going to stream every day. But, I am sort of wondering how this is going to go, if you guys are going to like it, if you guys are going to enjoy it, because maybe I could do it more often. The other thing is that, we do so much Q&A already during the podcast, it makes me, sort of wonder, is this redundant? You know what I mean? We didn't do the podcast this week, so that's one reason why I'm trying this out now, but maybe we'll try and do both and maybe spread it out a little bit. Super Chris, hello there. Thank you for modding. Let's see here. Duncan Corrigan. I saw some game sale analysis speculated that chip shortage left Nintendo with tough decision to either shelve OLED screens until chip situation resolved or released with less updated feature set. And, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about a little bit earlier. This could be related to COVID. That's possible, right? It could be. It could be that because of COVID, Breath of the Wild 2 and the 4K Switch were not ready this year. As I initially predicted for both of them to come out this October. Maybe that was the initial plan, right? It kind of makes me feel good thinking that maybe that was a plan. That way I don't feel as dumb for being wrong about it. But, it's possible, for sure. It's hard to say. I think next year, if we do get like Breath of the Wild 2 and Switch Pro for that holiday, then that would probably be very suggestive of that being this being the case. The speculation maybe they're supposed to come out this year, but COVID derailed all of that. And COVID is related to chip shortages, by the way, for those who are confused. Sweet Life of Dio Brando. I like the new screen. Yeah, it looks real clean. That's kind of the thing. Like I kind of want to play Metroid Dread on there. I'm not always gonna play Metroid Dread in portable mode, but it looks nice. It looks nice. Like I don't want to spend $350 on it, but there's a part of me that does. But if there is a Switch Pro coming out next year, like an actual Switch Pro, like a 4K Switch, then I'm gonna feel quite burned. But maybe I could just trade it. I don't know. I don't know, but I definitely want it. I don't know if I'll buy it, but I definitely want it. ASAP, bro. I watched the whole Switch OLED trailer this morning, just waiting for Nintendo to say 4K DLSS better frame rates, and none of that happened. I was right there with you. I was looking through the trailer. I watched it a couple different times. I looked at all of Nintendo's different tweets of the details. I looked at the Nintendo specs page. I saw a few other people report specs, and there's been nothing to that. I think I saw some analysts say something that, oh, it's gonna have 4K, but there's been no official information that I've seen that suggested that in the slightest. Not yet, at least, and I don't expect it at this point either. I did speculate, though, that, and I'm still speculating, that it might be the case that the system might be better customized to sort of run on 4K televisions, maybe, slightly, like just slightly, but it's nothing really worth marketing for. That's a possibility, right? Like, it might be the case that when this Switch comes out, people do some stress tests and see that it does run at a slightly better frame rate. It's a bit more stable, or maybe they'll show that it upscales into dock mode a little bit better than the other one. That's a possibility, but it's nothing that Nintendo's willing to market. Let's see here. ASAP Bro. This OLED model just seems like it's more of a more for portable players, and I never played portably, so this announcement was disappointing. And you know what? I see your point with that. If you do not play portably, then this system isn't worth it. It's the only sort of advantage it offers is that it looks cool, and that it has an Ethernet port, which is really awesome, but is it worth buying another $350 since you have a Switch? No. But if you're someone who doesn't have a Switch yet, you should definitely go for the OLED version. I absolutely believe that. But you know, if you only play in TV mode, the only real benefit you're getting in terms of application is, you know, a better connection through Ethernet, which you may or may not use. You may not even care for that. So I kind of understand that. This is definitely catering more towards improving portable play. So yeah, I totally get it. 100% understand. So that is a good point to consider. This doesn't really improve the home console experience too much. Sweet Life of Dio Brando. Would have preferred new Joy-Cons. And yeah, that's another thing. The Joy-Cons are still the same type of Joy-Cons. Elvin R. I wish it would have improved the frame rates and such. Now, it's possible that the system may have slightly better internals. So when it comes out, people will do some tests and they'll say, hey, this one runs slightly better. Like, that is a possibility. It may be slightly more stable. But again, it's not, if it is, it's nothing that I would assume is significant because Nintendo is not marketing it at all. Joy CJ, it's almost an upgraded Lite you can dock. That's fine. I'm hoping the next upgrade focuses on dock mode mainly. So, you know, if there is a next revision, instead of just colors, yeah, I would like to see kind of like, you know, basically what they have with this OLED model, but have 4K functionality in the system, and maybe themes. I'm just moving through the chat here. Birdman, people who are saying they will not be getting the system is all good, more chances for me to buy it. Yeah, right. If not everyone wants it, then maybe some of us who do will, you know, like, be able to get it instead of it being sold out everywhere. Giancarlo added me. The 4K Switch the 4K version Switch, Bloomberg said, is actually the Switch successor. Really? If there's a report on that, if there's a report on that, guys in chat, let me know what I should sort of search to read that. That'd be really interesting to read. Maybe it is going to be like that next gen Switch, right? But they're going to do something. They're going to, if it comes out, say, next year, hypothetically, maybe it's a situation where it's next gen, but it's still mid gen in the sense that Switch, if you have a base Switch, all games coming out, you'll still be able to play for a while. And maybe like by 2023, then exclusives will start coming out for this next gen Switch. Like, that's a possibility. That's kind of how both Sony and Microsoft are handling their systems. So maybe there something like that could be happening. But simply based off how well Switch is doing right now, I don't see them kind of like closing out that audience even next year. Like, there needs to be kind of a dip to an extent. Now, I understand maybe Nintendo wants to sort of maintain momentum, just transition smoothly, but Nintendo hasn't done a very good job of that, at least with their home console. So it's going to be interesting to see sort of how they handle that. But yeah, we're so late into the Switch's life cycle. That's another reason why I'm skeptical of it being a mid-gen refresh, and more of like a next-gen system if it comes out within the next couple of years. But we'll see. I definitely think we're getting Joycey's saying, I definitely think we're getting a Pro, but maybe not until 2024. They'll pass out the OG Switch. Then they'll phase out the OG Switch. That maybe 2024 does seem like a kind of a good time. That's still 3 years from now. I do think that's maybe what they could be doing. Some of you seem to agree. This Super Nintendo Switch 2024 thing, a few people are saying that. Switch 2. The eFox. I'm thinking a hardware upgrade for Switch will happen, but it'll be a next-gen system. Could be. Natsu. I'm personally going to get the OLED Switch because my current Switch is dying on me. The left Joy-Con reel no longer charges my Joy-Cons. You see, it sounds like yours is even a little bit worse off than mine, but it's kind of like that thinking, like maybe it's just a good time to kind of like just update the Switch, right? I've had mine since March 2017. If I got one now, it wouldn't be that bad. My only concern is that if only a year later they have a Switch Pro, then I'll be like, I wasted my money. But, you know, I don't know. It's tough. But it's appealing. Hermione Granger, hello. Do you think Nintendo can just go on for a long time without more powerful hardware? They're doing it. The Switch is not that powerful now, and they're thriving. Because this is sort of like a merger of the home console and sort of like portable markets for Nintendo, they're seeing great success. The 3DS did well, the DS did well, the Game Boy Advance did well, the Game Boy did well. Nintendo always succeeds with their portables. It's their home consoles have been sort of hit or miss. But with the Switch, it's sort of because they combined that, you know, it seems to have had a really nice effect for both sides. And historically speaking, look at all those hardwares. Most of the time, they're pretty underpowered. The Game Boy, the Game Boy Advance, the Nintendo DS competed with the PSP. The 3DS competed with the Vita. Those systems were far more powerful. The argument has always been that the systems weren't that powerful, but they still done really well. And the Switch is doing really well, and it's not that powerful compared to PlayStation and Xbox, but at the same time, considering the fact that it's mobile technology, it is still pretty impressive. So, you know, there is that to consider there. It's, I guess, you know, what we got to sort of consider is our third party is going to start caring more about Xbox and PlayStation a year or so from now, once development for the next generation systems becomes more common. Maybe, right? But the Switch is still a thriving system with a future ahead of it, a very healthy sort of install base right there, and a lot more people buy games on Switch than other systems. So, you know, I think the Switch is going to command a lot of support from third parties. It should, at least, you would think. And not everyone's going to feel inclined to advance the next generation. Also, there's so many different types of games that are developed now with different sort of like budgets and scale and things of that nature. like, not every developer needs to make a big, ambitious 4K, 120 frame per second, 128 person online open world game with crazy physics, right? And the most advanced textures and HDR and ray tracing. Like, not every game has to be that. So there's a lot of games that are going to come out that will have less, let's say, lesser in scope or less technically demanding game styles and designs that the Switch can still run, right? So I guess my point is that the Switch doesn't have to get every type of game that the third party makes, and it doesn't now. So I think conceivably the Switch can go on for another 2 or 3 years and be fine. Now I think the third year is pushing it, right? I think 3 years from now is like the latest they should wait to come out with a next generation system, but they could. So, you know, we'll see. But conceivably it's 2 years. 2 to 3 years is my sort of range. I know some people have sort of talked about how Nintendo executives have told us that we're only halfway through the Switch's life cycle, but that's can be kind of confusing because, one, they have been saying that for a little while, but they started saying that last year, right? So this last year, about 3.5 years into Switch's life cycle, if that was actually the exact halfway point, 3.5 years later would put us into, let's say that was 2020, that would put us into 2023, holiday 2023, right? Like, yeah, holiday 2023, maybe early 2024. And that's sort of what we're kind of talking about happening now, the 3-year sort of mark. That's not a stretch. But at the same time, there's usually overlaps with Nintendo systems. There's, at least with the portable systems, like you look at the Game Boy Advance, the DS, there were games coming out for Game Boy Advance while the DS was out. And there were games coming out for the 3DS while the Switch was out. There's likely going to be overlap with the Switch and the next generation system as well. So the Switch may be supported for 3 to 4 more years, but it doesn't mean Nintendo won't come out with their next generation system like 2 to 3 years from now. There's gonna be overlap. I can pretty much guarantee that almost. So, you know, timing wise, that's something else to consider. Peter Griffin, where do you get your ideas from? My head. And the news and speculation and being a nerd. And having discussions with people and talking about it in streams like this and sharing it with you guys and hearing your thoughts. There's so many different things. You know, I do research sometimes too. I've read things, I've listened to audiobooks on things in the history of Nintendo and things of that nature. I've been paying attention to Nintendo since I was a little kid. So, you know, all of this is kind of just like part of my thought process. Thomas Owen. This is great for people looking to purchase a Switch for the first time and hopefully a great push for Metroid, right? Yeah, I think the Switch Oled is going to be great for sure. It's going to be interesting to see how that all comes together. It's nice to see that Metroid's getting such a push. Pre-order sales are looking strong. Hype is looking great for Metroid Dread. This is going to be the best-selling Metroid game ever, and that's exciting. That's really exciting. And, you know, with Metroid Dread performing, if this is a hit, maybe Nintendo will sort of debate if maybe Metroid Prime 4 should be a launch title for Switch Pro or a next generation Switch, depending on the timing of things. Just something else to consider. I see I have a super chat here from Robert Salazar. Thank you very much, Robert. What are your professional or career aspirations? Thanks for asking. I'm actually kind of excited that I got a question that wasn't necessarily gaming related. Not that you can ask me game related stuff. That's what I do. I like it. But my professional career aspirations, I personally do want to become like a full-time content creator, right? This is not my full-time job. I would love it if it would be. One, because I just love doing this, right? But there's more I'd like to do with the channel, right? I'd like to make a little bit more content more consistently. I'd like to maybe do things to ensure there's more quality to them. I'd like to have sort of a nice base where I can be like, all right, I know this product will be successful. Let's put together like a short film that's like related to like gaming or like Nintendo, but like, you know, like a skit or a parody. Like, what if I were to make like something for Halloween that was based off like the Curse of the Mask that would be sort of tying into Majora's Mask, right? Or what if I were to make like a horror sort of like style short film that would be related to maybe Metroid Prime or Resident Evil? Like, there are things like that I would love to do. I remember like years ago when my channel was still early on, I did a skit with a couple friends that work in film, and it was kind of like training for a Smash Bros tournament, right? And it was sort of like Rocky themed, and that was fun. Like I would love to do more things like that, and if I was full time with as a content creator, I'd be able to do that. And you know, maybe I would do other things like like live streaming and stuff. Maybe I would go to different conferences and talk to different people and things like that. Like that would all be really exciting. And then the lifestyle for me would be nice because it would be a flexible thing. It'd be my own business that I would own and run, and it'd be independent. And I really want that for myself. So yeah, that is kind of my goal. I do work at a Fortune 500 company currently. It's retail related, and it gets the job done for the time being, for sure. But there's definitely a lot I would like to do, and even if I were to get to that point, that wouldn't be like the end, right? I would want to build upon that, come up with more creative ideas, brainstorm with other people, come up with projects, do different things. I would love to do that. This is me kind of being a total dork. This entire channel is that, right? But like if I had like resources, I would love to like do like nature expeditions and stuff, which is entirely different. It probably wouldn't be related to the channel, but maybe I would like show it on social media or something. But those are some of the things I would like to do in the future if I could kind of grow with this. That's definitely sort of like some of my goals. But let's move on here with the chat. Let's see here. Paul Dunn, who do you think will win the NBA Finals? Thanks for asking. I am a big basketball fan, so I believe it will be the Phoenix Suns. They have a cohesion with their team. They've been playing well. They seem to have the momentum right now. They haven't struggled nearly as much as the Bucks have struggled against their teams. They seem to have less wear and tear than the Bucks do. Giannis, their best player, is currently injured. The Suns, not saying that injuries could theoretically impact them. Chris Paul has a history of injuries. Like he typically sort of gets injured in the playoffs, like right before he's about to sort of complete a really great sort of playoff run. I hope that doesn't happen because I would love for the guy to get a championship, because I feel like he's one of those players that is deserving of one. And this would look really good for his legacy. So, I would like to see the Phoenix Suns win, but I also think they are positioned to win. I think they have an advantage right now in terms of health and momentum. So I'm thinking they're gonna beat the Milwaukee Bucks. But Milwaukee Bucks are a good team too, and if Giannis can come back, they could put up a fight. It's not set in stone. Sweet Life of Dio Brando. I do not expect 4K portable for another 5 years at least, since it would consume so much battery and heat up a decent amount. Yeah, a 4K system in portable mode doesn't really even seem needed, because a smaller screen like that, you don't really need to have a 4K resolution, I don't think. And to your point, yeah, it just wouldn't be effective in terms of battery consumption and heating and cost. Solo Jones added me. If Metroid doesn't meet the sales Nintendo's expecting, do you think that we won't see the post-Dread story arc Sakamoto-san is working on? Well, no, I think it'll happen. Metroid has had, Fusion came out in 2002. Metroid Dread's finally a continuation of that in 2021. It's been a long time. 19 years, right? If I'm not mistaken. So, and it still happened. What it would mean is that we would have to wait longer. That's pretty much it. So if Metroid Dread does not perform well, I don't think it means the end of the story. I think it just means waiting longer. Now, Sakamoto-san is getting older, right? Maybe he'll retire, but maybe he'll have those ideas and someone will take up those reins, right? Ideally, what I would love to see is for the Metroid series to become a very healthy, recurring series that we see almost every year or every couple of years. Different kinds, right? Like there's the 2D Metroid, there is the Prime series, and they could have other kinds of spin-offs as well. But I would like to see that brand be continuous, right? And by doing that, then they'll have a plan. Like kind of the same way they have for Mario and Zelda, they have a plan. They'll bring in younger talent, train them up, get them, see how well they can handle it, and they'll have people positioned to take up the reins for the franchise once the higher ups are ready to move on. So I'd love to see that happen for Metroid, and I feel pretty confident saying the Metroid Dread is poised to sell really, really well, actually. So I'm not really worried. I think the Metroid brand is about to see quite a boost, and it's gonna be something that will stick around for, I think, indefinitely. Swift SVT, do you think Nintendo's delaying first-party games like Mario Kart, Kirby, etc. to release them for when they release the Switch Pro? Maybe. Now, this Switch Pro, again, maybe more of a next-generation system. Hard to say, right? But you look at next year, Breath of the Wild 2, that's coming. Legends Arceus, Triangle Strategy, Splatoon 3, Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope. That's 5 games that are relatively major. But there's other options as well, right? Conceivably, we could see Prime Trilogy come out next year. We could see Bayonetta 3 come out next year. We could see another game from Molosoft come out next year. We could see that Donkey Kong game that's supposedly been made by the Mario team. Or if it's not the Mario team, we could still see that Donkey Kong game, and maybe there's still something from the Mario team. And then there's a team behind ARMS and Mario Kart. They could have something that's about ready as well. These teams have been developing games for like 3 to 4 years already. A lot of them are very close to having games come out. So there's definitely... Nintendo is poised to have a very, very strong lineup next year. One of the better ones. Just looking at what we already have, Breath of the Wild 2 and Splatoon 3 are huge. And there's bound to be more. So, yeah, things are looking pretty good. And it is suggestive that they could have some big hardware prepared. That is a point to be made. And right now I'm thinking less likely that that's a 4K Switch, but maybe, it's the more and more I think about this software, maybe there is something going on there. So I'm not entirely convinced, as I said in my video earlier, as information comes out, as the story develops, as we have more time to think about things, my thoughts will change, and I'm sure for a lot of you it will change as well. But I do think I don't know if Nintendo's necessarily like holding them back. To go back to your question, Swift, I think a lot of it has to do with COVID. But at the same time, I think it's also clear that Nintendo does save products for when they think it's a good time for them to come out, right? I don't think Breath of the Wild 2 is ready. I don't think Splatoon 3 is ready. I think if those games were ready, maybe Nintendo would push out maybe a 4K Switch this year, if that is something they have planned for next year, right? So, I think it's not so much that Nintendo saves there's a number of reasons why Nintendo might delay or save something, right? It could just be that the game's not ready. Nintendo makes sure that their games get a certain level of polish for the most part. So it could be that. It could be because they were pushed because of COVID. A lot of things have been pushed because of COVID. So that it could be that. And I wouldn't say it's specifically because they're saving it for Switch Pro, but I do think they save games for times that make sense in their opinion. Some of it may just be because they know they have this thing that they just want to save it for in case a game gets delayed and they want to fill up a certain slot. Like it could be something like that. And it could be that maybe they do want to save it to push something at a certain time, right? That's a possibility. There's just so many options. I don't think Nintendo has specifically like delayed Mario Kart or a Kirby game for Switch Pro, because there are other options, right? Like let's say, for example, the same way Metroid Dread is pushing the Switch OLED this year, right? If Breath of the Wild 2 is ready this year, I feel like you could almost guarantee that Breath of the Wild 2 would have been that showcase game instead of Metroid Dread, right? But they didn't delay Switch OLED because of that. They just focused on Metroid Dread, and it's fine. Metroid Dread, I think, is going to do a great job of showcasing that. But that's just kind of what I think. AMG69, do you think they will do an overhaul of the Switch operating system before the OLED Switch release? We need themes. We are approaching the 5-year anniversary for the Switch. We are 4.5 years into the system's life cycle. I don't know. I can't predict that. I don't have any evidence to suggest it. I'm not saying it can't happen, but I'm just saying, like, why didn't it happen next year? Why can't it just happen the year after that, right? So maybe, but there's nothing necessarily that I think is suggesting that for sure now is the time we get themes. You know what I mean? Like, it could happen this year. It could maybe have happened last year. It could happen next year. Hard to say. I see I got another super chat here from Taker610. Thank you very much, Taker. Taker says, given the 2-year pattern, I can see next gen Switch fall 2023. That would be 6.5 years on the market. Maybe deluxe next gen versions of Breath of the Wild 2 and Prime 4. Yeah, I think that actually lines up pretty well with my speculation. I don't know if we'll get a deluxe version of Breath of the Wild 2, but maybe, right? Maybe there is like a special Game of the Year edition with additional content in there. That's possible, right? And the same could apply for Prime 4. Prime 4 could end up being a 2023 release. So maybe it is like the big sort of launch title for a system that comes out fall 2023. And maybe what Nintendo's doing now with Metroid Dread and the Switch OLED is a testing ground for that. Maybe they want to see how much Metroid can maybe push hardware, right? Maybe they want to see how that's going to sell. And if this does do well, maybe they will sort of consider Prime 4 as sort of like a hardware pushing game in 2023. It's certainly, a possibility. I think 6.5 years would be a healthy amount of time for the Switch. But again, just because a Switch 2 could come out conceivably holiday 2023 or fall 2023, that doesn't mean that the base Switch games just end, right? Let's go back to the examples we used earlier. Game Boy Advance games were coming out for a little while when the DS came out. I want to say Mother 3 came out in 2006 on the Game Boy Advance, but the DS actually came out holiday 2024, holiday 2004, not 24. So there's that. And then the Nintendo Switch came out in 2017, right? But in March 2017, but you want to know when we got our last Metroid game? Metroid Samus Returns, the remake of Metroid 2, that came out late 2017. And there were games that came out even beyond that. Like, I think there were games coming out in 2018 on the 3DS, right? Not a lot, but there were some, like Nintendo published titles. So there have been overlap with Nintendo's handhelds. I don't expect it to really change too much with the Switch, especially with how well it's doing. Nintendo is going to want to overlap. They're going to want to be smart in terms of transitioning over to the next system. I think this time around, they're not going to wait for their sales to just drop down to a halt and their software to just be dead for a whole year. They're going to maintain momentum. So I think that's just something to keep in mind. Natsu, those white Joy-Cons look amazing, don't they? Regular Dad here. What happened to that F-Zero and Star Fox collaboration game? So, I believe you're referring to Star Fox Grand Prix. So, that wasn't technically an F-Zero collaboration based off the reports. And there were some sites corroborating that. I want to say Eurogamer put out a report, not Digital Foundry, but that they're associated with Eurogamer. I think even IGN said they heard some. Yes, IGN did say they had heard some things as well. They helped to corroborate the reports for that. But later on, speculation sort of surfaced that maybe it was just a hoax. Totally possible. Maybe it was canned. Maybe it was canceled. That's also a possibility. Supposedly it was being worked on by Retro Studios. I will tell you that Retro Studios hasn't come out with a brand new game since 2014. We know they're working on Metroid Prime 4 now. But what have they done in the last 7 years? Have they had no game that's been ready to show off? I don't know. It's hard to say. Why would Nintendo trust them to make Metroid Prime 4 if they weren't able to come out with a game? I don't know. I don't understand all the inner workings there. Maybe they had something, maybe they canned it, maybe they decided to save it for a rainy day. It could be one of those secret Nintendo Vault games, right? Along with Prime Trilogy and Bayonetta 3 and Switch Pro and Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD and Pikmin 4. But I don't know. I want to believe that there's a Retro Studios game besides Prime 4 that's like almost done or done and just in a vault somewhere until sort of waiting to release it. But at this point, I'm kind of inclined to think that whatever happened, it just hasn't come to fruition as an actual game. Maybe Retro Studios simply put a halt on it to focus on Prime 4. Hard to say. Maybe they're working on 2 different titles at a time right now, one being Prime 4 and one on another thing that has been worked on for the last few years. and it's still not done yet. Maybe it would have come out this year, but COVID pushed it up, right? It's possible. At this point, I'm kind of just assuming it's not happening because we've been waiting for it for such a long time. Yeah, I'll tell you that I was warming up to the idea of a Star Fox Grand Prix. The idea of like there being like a hub world that you could explore and do things like that. Like it could have been a fun little thing. Granted, I still need my traditional Star Fox or something that was like a good sort of like, I guess, progression for Star Fox. You know, kind of like Breath of the Wild is a good progression for Zelda, even though it's maybe not traditional Zelda. Something like that for Star Fox would have been nice. I'm not saying specifically open world, just like a new idea to propel the mainline Star Fox series. I want to see that first before we see a spin-off. You know, like, for example, they gave us Federation Force, which people didn't appreciate. Had we gone like a mainline Metroid first or announced, maybe then people would have been more open to Metroid Federation Force. Which, by the way, I would love to see another Federation Force game if it was done better on a better online setup, just not chibi-fied, a little bit more serious, and as an in-between game for mainline Metroid games. Let's see here. Kyodai 627. Donkey Kong was not inspired by King Kong, by the way. It was first going to be a licensed Popeye, the Sailor Man arcade game. So there was some Popeye in there, but the Donkey Kong himself there was also King Kong inspiration. It was a mix up of both, actually. But that's a good thing to point out that there was some Popeye considered with Jumpman. Yeah, Jumpman is inspired by Popeye. That is a good thing to point out. That the Donkey Kong, the Beast, was inspired by King Kong. Good afternoon, Beverly Carter. For me, it is evening, but good afternoon. Sonic, how do you feel about this OLED Switch right now? Is there more or just next gen? It's a toss-up. You know, when you think about the strongest lineup of software that's coming next year, it's really, really compelling. It makes you think that maybe Nintendo would have hardware to support, that they want to sort of support some hardware. Then it would make sense of all the reports and rumors we had of like a DLSS supported Switch system. But at the same time, we're getting a $350 price Switch now. It's a little hard for me to sort of believe that next year we're getting another more expensive Switch than even that. It just hasn't been how Nintendo has handled things. I feel like it makes maybe more sense to just have more colors for Switch OLED, right? But it's not out of the question, right? It really just comes down to how Nintendo pushes and markets things. Maybe there's an ambassador program and they price drop things. Ambassador program for those who get a Switch OLED potentially. And maybe it's not next year. Maybe it's the year after that. And if it's the year after that, maybe I can see that. But at that point, maybe it is next gen, right? Maybe it's sort of a bit of an in-between where it's sort of a blurred line situation where it will function as next gen and eventually maybe it'll have some exclusive games. But for the time being, base Switch owners that got their system back in 2017 will still be able to play all the new games. It'll still be fully compatible for a couple more years. Hard to say right now. It's a toss-up. Let's see here. Oh, I missed this one. I missed this. There's a few chats I've missed. I'm trying to keep up here, but you guys have done a great job of making it hard for me to keep up. Keep up, making it hard for me to make it keep up because there's plenty we could talk about. Hermione Granger, do you think Metroid Prime 4 could launch alongside next-gen Switch? Yeah, it really just comes down to timing, but 2023 could be that time potentially. As I talked about earlier, I think with Metroid Dread right now, it could be Nintendo sort of testing to see how Metroid is with pushing hardware. Could be. And I think Prime 4 is going to be a big deal. Prime 4, I think, should be just as big as Breath of the Wild 2, at least in terms of like development ambition, I think, or close to it, not too far off. Not saying it's going to sell as well as Breath of the Wild 2, but it's going to be a big one. The Sean Kelkar, if you like SMT, you'll really enjoy Persona. I also suggest going with Persona 5 Royal because it has quality life improvements and extra story and characters. Noted. The Sith Saiyan, do you need some copium after watching the Switch OLED trailer? I don't know what copium is. Is that a drug? I don't know. Hermione Granger, what if they sold a 4K dock for Switch but not the Switch itself? At one point or another, I thought that made a lot of sense. And maybe that's what they'll do, right? Maybe there isn't another Switch, but there's like a dock that's 4K capable, and you can plug in any Switch and it gives you 4K capabilities. Could be, maybe that's what they'll do instead of having another Switch come out next year. That I think, at least for me, that makes more sense in terms of like ask for what Nintendo may be asking for fans to purchase. But at the same time, I also feel like Nintendo might just want to release another Switch, right? Like just put out another revision out there. I don't think it's out of the question because there were like patents a few years ago before we knew what the Switch was for a supplemental computing device, which would be what a 4K dock would be, right? It would be something that's you connect to the Switch like a peripheral that offers more power, something that's supplemental to the overall power of the system. So that'd be awesome. I don't know how that technology would work necessarily, but I'm down. If that happens, I'm down. But again, I'm not necessarily expecting it either, but I'll acknowledge it as an option. Beverly Card, I have a question. So do you think there's a confirmation for the Nintendo Switch OLED model to announce a new IP? This might break chances for Xenoblade Chronicles 3 coming in 2022. I don't see how this would at all impact chances for Xenoblade Chronicles 3 coming in 2022. That said, I'm also not saying Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is coming in 2022 either. I think that it could I think it's probably already in development, but I'm sort of expecting another project from Mollensoft to come out first. We had hirings for that project back in 2017. This is 2021, 4 years later. Maybe by 2022, 5 years that they've been into development, they put out that project, and then after that, maybe we see Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Maybe. I mean, heck, if we get Xenoblade Chronicles 3 next year, I'm not going to complain. That's totally fine with me. But I don't think the Switch revision situation impacts Xenoblade at all. It really just comes down to if the game is ready yet, and I'm not sure it is. Swift SVT, who was your first guest for the last DLC on Smash Brothers? The first thing that comes to mind is Emmy from Metroid Dread. I just feel like Nintendo will end things with a Nintendo character, just because they'll have like a 3-3 ratio of third parties to first parties. And I think with how hard Nintendo is pushing and marketing Metroid right now, that's coming out launch day with the Switch revision, it had all this focus at E3. It wouldn't surprise me if they want to push it just a little bit more with by adding another Metroid character. And I think some people will be like, oh, Emmy's not something that's worthy of the final Smash DLC. But I think the point I made in my video about a week ago is that no matter what Nintendo and Sakura and the Smash team choose to develop as the final character for the DLC, there will be people that will be disappointed. No matter what it is. The character is going to be hyped for some people, but it's not going to be hyped for everyone. So I just think it's going to be a character that's going to be cool. Some people are going to really appreciate it, other people will not. That's pretty much how every single character for Smash DLC is. But yeah, my first thought is Emmy. And I could totally be wrong, but that's just what I'm sort of hoping / thinking might happen. Let's see here. Swift SVT, what would you say about Bowser from Bayonetta for the last Smash DLC? Seems unlikely to me. I feel like Bayonetta is pretty much it from the Bayonetta series, but Bayonetta 3 is on the way. Maybe they want to sort of market and push that. So it's not out of the question, but I don't expect that. Computer robots, looks like you're getting buffed lately. I know you've been going to the gym, but it looks like you made an improvement on you as anyone else. I have not been going to the gym. I have been lifting a little bit more weights than usual lately, but honestly, I don't feel like I've looked noticeably bigger at all yet. So I think really right now I'm just trying to not get fat. Natsu, do you think we'll see Breath of the Wild 2 again at Game Awards? Maybe. I think we're going to see something pretty cool at the Game Awards. It's either going to be Breath of the Wild 2 or something related to Metroid. Or Bayonetta. One of those three. At least one of those three will show up. Breath of the Wild 2 is a very good option because there's such a strong history with Breath of the Wild at the Game Awards. And it's already something that's like kind of like known, and people for sure will be excited about that. Nintendo Love Girl. Would you get a black and white Joy-Con OLED or a red and blue Joy-Con? I already have red and blue Joy-Cons because from my launch day Switch, and I'm so excited for Metroid Dread. I personally feel like it's the Emmy edition. It seems to be sort of like very similar to the colors of the Emmy, the white and black Joy-Cons, or the white Joy-Cons with the black of the dock and stuff. So I'm gonna go for that for sure if I get one. The white Joy-Con OLED Switch. Let's see here. Sweet Life of Dio Brando. 3D Donkey Kong is hard to imagine outside Donkey Kong 64, which I did not like, to be honest. Well, Donkey Kong 64 had a few issues, because if I remember correctly, you had to change your character to go back and collect different collectibles, so it became very sort of exhausting and a little repetitive. But you can fix that, right? I think that there is a way to make a nice quality 3D platforming Donkey Kong. Not saying that's what we're getting, but it would be something different, right? It would require, it wouldn't be quite Donkey Kong 64. It'd be something different, which to me is exciting. I would love to see Nintendo try and make another 3D platform that isn't Mario. I think they could do something special with that. Imagine if they were to think more along the lines of like aerial platforming and something with someone that has more heft behind their movement, like Donkey Kong. I think there's some potential magic there. I don't know if for sure they're doing something 3D, but I do feel like this Donkey Kong game that we're hearing about, I feel like similar to Metroid Dread, they're gonna blur those lines a little bit between 2D and 3D. Maybe it's even more blurred. Maybe there's even more 3D elements than Metroid. We talked about for Metroid Dread. I feel really, there were things we got wrong with our predictions, but there were also some things we got right? Like the Mario Rabbids thing and Metroid Dread. But for Metroid Dread, we talked about how they would show off some first-person perspective elements, and we saw that in the trailer. We also talked about how they would probably blur the lines a little bit. And they have, right? Like there is the Omega Cannon that goes behind your shoulder. There's all those fluid cutscenes that zoom in and show it at an angle, and it seems to be somewhat interactive, kind of like how it was in Samus Returns. So there's, I wouldn't be surprised if the next Donkey Kong does something similar as well. Considering what they did with Tropical Freeze and Returns and also Jungle Beat, how they played around with the camera perspective even those, I think they're going to take another step in that direction and really blur those lines between 2D and 3D, assuming it is a 2.5D game. Not to. I'm very cautious about Pokemon Legends. So, I'm actually feeling pretty good about Pokemon Legends. They didn't show it off, but they did show off Pokemon Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl. And what people have been noting, actually, maybe I could put this up. I think I saw, I want to say Joe Merrick posted about this. Yeah. Joe Merrick is the guy behind Cerebi. You should check him out. But he pointed something out in the trailer that I think was quite nice. So let me show you here. All right, so this is just Joe Merrick's Twitter, right? But he pointed out that the footage in the trailer for the Switch OLED shows off what looks to be an improved sort of visual look for Pokemon Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl. And I'll tell you, I have not been a fan of the overall look for Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl. I feel like it looks a little bit too chibi. But pay attention to the backpack here, right? Like, there's not that much detail on it. Now let's go to the next page. Boom. Look at that. There's a lot more detail to it. It seems to have more depth. Both of the colors seem to be not as contrasted, a little bit more realistic, I would say, actually. It seems to be sort of shying away from that chibi look a little bit, which is something I actually want. I don't want this to be a chibi style game. So there's something about it that just looks a little bit more detailed. Perhaps they worked on the lighting a little bit too, it seems like. Yeah, it seems like they played around with that. The colors are definitely different, that's for sure. Maybe they heard the backlash and they were like, yeah, we need to kind of change this up a little bit. Like that's from the initial trailer. And you look at this, like the coloring, the lighting is different. There does seem to be more detail. So, the game does look better, I would say. And that's for Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, not Legends Arceus. But the point I'm trying to make with that is that, you know, it's if they're going through those improvements with Pokemon Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, and that's an outsourced game, what are we gonna see for Legends Arceus? It might even be more improved, more enhanced. So I'm looking forward to seeing that, and I think we're getting close to some more news on both Pokemon games really soon. So, you know, I'm not as cautious about it. I'm actually looking forward to it, and I think Game Freak is actually gonna do a pretty good job this time around, because they actually were given a little bit more time than usual to get the job done. So that's actually, I would say, semi-reassuring. David Haney saying, everyone hit that like button. Thank you for saying that, and yeah, maybe hit that like button, guys. I'd appreciate it. I watched the OLED trailer, Nintendo Love Girl. The Sean Kelkar, do you think we'll get rehydrated and muscly Ganondorf that's fully voiced in Breath of the Wild 2, like when he regains his energy by the end of the game? I don't know if he'll be fully rehydrated, but he will be big, he will be ominous, and I do think there will be voice acting. The reason why I don't think he'll lose some of his muscly look, his mummy look, and that may happen, because there is like in the first trailer, they do show like a shadow that seems to be pointing towards how he looked back before he was all dehydrated or mummified. So that could be the case, but I kind of like seeing this version of Ganondorf because it's very dark. It's very maybe demonic or evil looking, right? And I would actually like to see him sort of expand more into that direction, get even darker, more gruesome, more evil, more demented. Like, I want to see them go more in the dark direction, right? But I do think there's a really good chance he's going to be voiced. Breath of the Wild has voice acting. Breath of the Wild 2, I think, is still going to have voice acting. But the one thing to maybe that it was maybe a good argument against voice acting for Ganondorf is maybe this Ganondorf doesn't really have much of a conscience. Maybe he doesn't really have much of a personality. But I think one of the big points about it being Ganondorf and not just Calamity Ganon, a force of nature, is that it's now more of a humanoid, something with a history, something that we can sort of relate more to and understand. And with that comes maybe the expectation that there's going to be dialogue there. And if there's going to be dialogue there, considering that Breath of the Wild 2 has Breath of the Wild 1 had voice acting, I kind of expect voice acting for Ganondorf. So I'd actually be surprised and a little disappointed if we don't see voice acting for Ganondorf from Breath of the Wild 2. Tigger 610, I'm just going to buy the new dock in white. If you can buy it separately, yeah, that makes sense, right? Which, you know, maybe there will be like 4K docks coming out next year instead of like a whole Switch 4K thing, but we'll see. Antioch Kaled, do you think Nintendo will give us a Metroid tetralogy, Metroid 1 through 4, alongside Metroid Dread? So I put out a video a while ago where I was sort of speculating that maybe for the Nintendo Online, they add Game Boy Advance games this year. And if they were to do that, all of a sudden we have Metroid Zero Mission, which is a remake of Metroid 1. And we would also have Metroid Fusion, which is Metroid 4. And we already have Metroid 3 on Nintendo Online, which is Super Metroid. The only one we're missing is Samus Returns. So I don't know if we'll see Samus Returns added anytime soon. But I could see Zero Mission and Fusion coming out then. And, you know, that's pretty much it. I think Samus Returns would be something... That'd be another project, because that would be a port. It wouldn't just be... It would be more than a port, because you have to rework it, because it's 3DS to Switch and the dual screen sort of thing going on there. Changes would need to be done. It wouldn't have to be something dramatic, but it would be more than just a Nintendo Online sort of thing. Yeah. Granted, it's also possible maybe they don't do the Nintendo Online thing, or maybe they do and still do this, and they do just release like a 4-game pack like that. The games aren't as big as, say, like Mario 3D All-Stars, so maybe they do something like that to celebrate Metroid's 35th anniversary. That's a possibility. But at the very least, I don't know, maybe even at the very least, but I do think there's a chance we see some sort of Metroid game added to at least the Nintendo eShop before Metroid Dread comes out. But we'll see. They may just want us to just play Metroid Dread and be okay with it, which I'm fine with because I think the game's going to be great, and I think they're doing a great job of getting fans prepared for it without actually having played previous games. You don't need to enjoy the story, just to be clear. Game walkthroughs. Can I buy the Switch OLED for you this October? If you buy it for me, I'll be okay with that. I'll take it. I'll accept that joyously. Nintendo. The docks do be looking kind of clean though. Yeah, right? It does look pretty clean. That's kind of why one of the reasons why I'm excited about it. It just looks nice. It just looks really, really nice. Jonathan Hemphill. So my plan is to wait for the tablet only eBay deals and just dock into my base Switch. Interesting. You're gonna want to wait just to see if it's compatible with the initial dock. It may be. I'm not saying it won't be, but it is a slightly different size. It might not fit. It might not work. So just be prepared for that. But it might. So, you know, once it comes out, I'm sure people will test it out. If I get it, I'll test it out for you. So, you know, just be patient on that. We don't know for sure. Sweet Ride 95. Hopefully the scalpers give me a hot minute to pick one up for myself. Hopefully. Do you think Bluetooth will be available for Nintendo OLED? Nintendo Love Girl asks. I don't know because they didn't say anything about that. I do remember hearing some sort of rumor about Bluetooth being prepared. I do feel like it's something that makes sense. And maybe it's something that Nintendo can just patch in, and it's just something that works for all different Switches, not just the OLED version. So maybe there's a patch that's coming that'll offer that. And that would work. Because there is Bluetooth technology in the base Switch already, so I feel like it should theoretically be possible. Computer robots. Andres Rista and guys in the chat, you think we're still going to get a Super Smash Bros. Ultimate Complete Edition and in a few years? For me, I hope so. That's a great sort of consideration. I think there's reason for that to happen. Yeah. Maybe, you know, they wait a little bit, maybe complete. Maybe it's kind of like Mario Kart Deluxe, right? They did it for Smash Ultimate. Yeah, they could maybe call it Super Smash Bros. Ultimate Deluxe. Maybe they throw in a couple more characters, you know, a couple more stages. Maybe they add like a target break mode or something, and that's it. And that puts a nice little ribbon on the entire Smash sort of Ultimate life. That's possible, and it wouldn't require nearly as much work as Smash Ultimate itself. And it may not even be something that Sakura would have to be involved in. Maybe you could just approve some things. So it's possible, for sure. Doka378. If it does have 4K upres like with the DLSS, don't the games have to be patched for it to work or no? I believe yes. To use a DLSS part, yeah, there has to be a patch. But if games have like a dynamic frame rate or resolution where there's fluctuation between resolution and frame rate, simply running on better hardware will stabilize that a little bit more. So some games, if the system was more powerful, would naturally just look and run better on it. But we don't, from what we've seen, the specs seem to be pretty much in line with the current Switch models. So I wouldn't expect that. They're not really marketing any sort of enhanced specs here. So I wouldn't expect that. If it happens, great, but don't expect it because Nintendo's not marketing that at all. Flippin'. I think that the OLED model will be the last model in the Switch family, and in 2 years we might get a next-gen Switch, and it could launch with Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2. 2 years from now will be 2023. So that would mean Breath of the Wild 2 would get delayed into 2023? I hope not. But I'll take your idea and I'll say maybe with Metroid Prime 4? Maybe? And maybe there's like a Breath of the Wild 2 Game of the Year edition the year after, and it has some DLC or something. So maybe, you know, maybe there could be like a dual sort of lineup like there. Maybe there's something to that idea. Regular Dad here. Look, kids, the Switch Pro is as real as a tooth fairy. Hey, there were a couple times when I was a kid where I put my tooth under the pillow and I got money afterwards. So, the tooth fairy exists. Sort of. Tooth fairy is just not who you think it is. Until Love Grow. I wonder what games will happen in 2024. It's just too far off. It's just too far off from now. F-Zero. Just throw something out there. I hope I don't have to wait that long, but I might have to. Will the OLED Switch Joy-Cons also have drift? That's the big question. Well, it's already been confirmed that the type of Joy-Cons that OLED Switch uses are the same type of Joy-Cons that are available already in the market. So they are theoretically just as susceptible. So they could have drift. But hasn't Nintendo like quietly revised them at all, or no? You have to check with that. My current Joy-Cons don't drift. I fixed that though. And they haven't drifted. They only drifted once, and I fixed it, and I haven't worried about it for the last like year or two. Regular Dad here. Dread is over 60 gigabytes, so it's not a short game. So I agree that it's probably not a short game, but I wouldn't look too much into how much storage a game takes up, because there's so many different things with storage. Like there's like Breath of the Wild is like a 9 gigabyte game, but there are games that are like 50 gigabytes that are far shorter than Breath of the Wild. A lot of it comes down to compression technology, audio files, image files, how the game is stored, the different types of layouts and things like that nature. There's so much different things going on that can impact the storage piece of a game. The amount of data or storage a game takes up isn't actually really indicative of how much gameplay that game will offer you. I mean, heck, like you can spend hundreds of hours on Tetris 99. That takes up like enough space, right? So there's a lot more to it than that. But I do think Metroid Dread is going to be a longer than usual side-scrolling Metroid game. I never really remember them being small games either, so, you know, I'm not worried about that. Doka 370, I'm an electronics idiot. I bought a replacement joystick kit and did it no problem in about 20 minutes for my Joy-Cons. Maybe you're not an idiot. I did something similar for mine. It's definitely doable. Aesop Rel added me. Samus Hunter was right about the Switch revision. He or she said it wouldn't have 4K or DLSS. Yeah, you know, maybe that's something to consider here, right? There are things that Samus Hunter has gotten right. There are things Samus Hunter has gone wrong. It's definitely, you know, like everyone else, no one's 100%, but there are definitely things that are said by Samus Hunter that I've seen come true. So I pay attention to them. There's definitely some things that could be leading to something potentially. So, you know, you take it with a grain of salt with everything. It's a rumor, but it's just things that I consider for sure. And maybe you guys could do the same. It's up to you, right? It's up to you to believe it or not. But I definitely think that there may be some credibility with her. Let's see here, moving on. Raptorius, happy birthday. Thank you for saying that I am your favorite Nintendo news YouTuber. I wish you a really great birthday. Rigo Romero, I do not know when the pre-order starts, unfortunately. I've never really been good about doing that. I probably should stop by GameStop tomorrow. Gotta do that. I'm just assuming I'm gonna buy it. I'm nuts. Anyway, Kyodai 627. But Furukawa just stated in February 2020 the Switch is at its halfway point. Doug Bowser echoed the same sentiment about Switch, and it's staying around for a long time. So I talked about this earlier. We got Nintendo executives were talking about Switch being at its halfway point even last year in 2020. And when they say halfway point, you gotta understand that they're saying them at different times. So the halfway point is just one single point, right? They're obviously ballparking that halfway point. It is suggestive that there's a few more years left. But what is a few more years, right? If it was in 2020, at that point, the Switch had come out in 2017, so 3 to 3.5 years, right? Then from that point, 3 to 3.5 more years, right? Which does place us somewhere between that 6 to 7 year window. But then also on top of that, take into consideration that with previous Nintendo handheld systems, there's been overlaps, right? 3DS games were coming out in 2018. Switch came out early 2017. With the Game Boy Advance, games are coming out in 2006. DS came out holiday 2004. So there's always there's a history of there being overlap with Nintendo's handheld systems in terms of software coming out and support. And yeah, 6 to 7 years is totally feasible for the Switch. And it could even go on longer, but again, because of overlap, right, that doesn't mean a next-gen system can't come out in 2023. I think I got to this question already, Paul John, but yeah, I think the Phoenix Suns are going to win the finals. That's my bank. Duncan Corgan, I hope you reach all your goals, Andres. Thank you. I will continue pushing towards them. Alex C&D is apparently starting his journey to be the first person to get the Nintendo Switch OLED at Nintendo New York City. Izzy XD 1019 said that. Yeah, wasn't he the first person to get a Nintendo Switch? So good for him. Oh, the Suns are winning game 1 right now. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm doing the stream right now, so I'm not watching it. Thomas Owen, do you think Prime 4 will release cross-gen or on this newly announced Switch, or just a purely next-gen? The timing of it is getting tricky, my friend. It's getting tricky. I think Prime 4 is definitely going to be used to help market some type of hardware. I believe that. The question is, what, right? Because let's say Switch 4K comes out next year. Does Prime 4 come out next year? I think that's unlikely, but is it impossible it comes out for the holidays next year? It's not. Maybe it's not impossible, but it seems unlikely, all things considered, especially with COVID. But if it did, maybe they launch together. Sure. But at this point, I'm not really necessarily sure we get a Switch 4K next year, right? Maybe, but maybe wait until 2023. And at that point, is it really just like a revision, or is it more of a next generation system, right? At that point, what is Prime 4? Well, it could be maybe a cross-gen release. Maybe there's 2 different versions. But it's also possible that this next generation system is a blurred line situation where it's treated as a pseudo mid-gen refresh and also next generation system. Something that hasn't been done before. But basically what I mean is, so all current Switch games will be playable on, it'll be forwards compatible, backwards compatible for a couple of years. So basically any game coming out for this revision, hypothetically coming out in 2023, you'll still be able to play on your Switch in 2017. But maybe in time they'll slowly phase things out, right? And maybe like the system that came out in 2017 will no longer be able to play things with the version that comes out in 2025. Like maybe that's how they'll do it. I'm not saying that's exactly how they're going to do it, right? But that would be similar to how iPhones kind of work, or just smartphones in general. Over time, the older devices are eventually phased out, but the generations are compatible within a certain amount of years. And depending on that can definitely impact what Prime 4 is. But I absolutely believe, regardless, Prime 4 will get a big push. Even if there is no hardware coming out in that particular year, it's going to get a really big push, and it's going to be a big deal. That I feel like I can almost guarantee. Let's see here. Just trying to catch up to the chat. You guys have kept it quite poppin'. So good on you guys. Nintendo. Weird question, but if you can make any Metroid game out of thin air, what would it be? Premise, concepts, and all. Mine would be a new, prettier Prime game focused on the Marines. So, there's so many different things that I think you could do with the Prime series, right? Like, for example, I would actually really like to see, as I mentioned earlier, a more serious take on Federation Force. I think it'd be a great sort of in-between kind of game. Think kind of like Halo ODST, but for Metroid. Maybe that's more of like a co-op multiplayer-centric kind of game. I'd love to see that. I think the Hunter series could be its own thing as well. Like more of a multiplayer online sort of centric game. Maybe it could be like a sort of like a free-to-play sort of setup on Nintendo Online, right? That'd be a really cool thing to do, you know, and it's just multiplayer, right? Like the single-player stuff, that's what Metroid Prime 4 is, that's what Metroid Dread is. But they could do stuff like that, which I think would be very exciting, and it could bring in a lot more fans to the Metroid franchise. So those are, you know, some ideas. One idea that I would love is them to maybe revisit the concept of Metroid Prime 1.5. So it's been a while since I looked into it, but Metroid Prime 1.5 was basically some ideas and concepts that they were working on before they did Prime 2. And a lot of those ideas translated into Prime 2, right? And you may notice that Prime 2 is a lot darker than Prime 1. But the ultimate concept of Prime 1.5 was that it was meant to be quite a bit of a psychological sort of thriller. It was meant to sort of mess with your mind. From what I remember vaguely, you were stuck in a space station. And there was an artificial intelligence that was a part of the entire sort of space station, a computer that was trying to kill you. And it would be dynamically sort of shutting doors, locking things down, trapping in rooms with poison gas, getting creatures to follow you throughout the space station, giving you messages, trying to fool you, changing around the orientation of the environment. Things like that, maybe putting in drugs into the air. Like there's different things they could do with that. So I would love for maybe a game like that to come out at some point. You know, maybe like, you know, kind of something like that, and it sort of ties in some ideas that were used for Eternal Darkness that came out back on the GameCube, which was also meant to sort of mess with your brain a little bit. So maybe they could play around with some of those ideas. Heck, a lot of those ideas could still be used in, say, Prime 4, for example. So those are some ideas I have for the Metroid series that I think would be pretty darn cool. Let's see here. Jonathan Evans. Nah, fam. I'm thinking by 23, it's a wrap on the Switch and all eyes are on a completely new console with a completely different name, concept, and design, to be honest. I mean, if you look at Nintendo's history, that definitely it supports that idea. But I also think, considering how successful Switch is, I feel like Nintendo has found the right formula. And I think it would be foolish of them to abandon that idea entirely. I think it makes more sense for them to sort of build off the ideas of the Switch and create something that's a clear successor to it. Maybe try out some unique things and ideas to make it more interesting and mix things up, but still keep that core concept of the Switch together, because that's what's successful, and that I think Nintendo is where Nintendo will thrive the most in. But it could happen in 2023. I do agree with that. For those that are arguing that 2023 seems too early, keep in mind, people are still playing the PlayStation 4s and Xbox, you know, ones right now, right? But they're still putting out those systems. Some people are moving on, and there's a lot of cross-gen releases right now, and it could be similar for the next Switch, right? There could be cross-gen releases for a couple of years before they fully transition into the next system. It could be something like that. Everyday Gamer. Yeah, I think Metroid Dread will be the biggest 2D Metroid because it's on the Switch. Yeah, I'm right there with you. I absolutely agree. It is. I think it's going to be the biggest, the best-selling Metroid game to date. Noah 45 Kings. My theory on the Microsoft collab. What if N64 is coming to Switch Online and Microsoft is putting Rare games on it in the fall? I would love that. I think it might be something different, just because I feel like Microsoft wouldn't be putting Switches in their own official live streams if it was just that. But maybe that could at least be a part of it. Like, I really would love to see that. At least like a Rare replay with some Nintendo Rare games that weren't a part of the initial Rare replay release on Switch. That would be really nice. So I do think something's coming, and you know, maybe we do see something like that. Let's see here. Moving on to chat. David Marsh. Also, I think the whole aiming for 2022 quote from Al Numa was purposely vague language so as not to draw attention away from Skyward Sword. Maybe that's the case. Maybe there, like I said, I think it's possible that Breath of the Wild 2 could come out March 2022, but simply based off everything they've shown and suggested and said, I do not expect it for March 2022. But I think that's like pretty much the most reasonably early it could come out. But I think expecting holidays may be a safer bet right now. But, you know, it's one of those things that I'd love to be wrong for. And if more evidence presents itself, you know, we'll definitely talk about it. Moving on here. Yeah, I don't know about pre-orders, unfortunately, Everyday Gamer. That's not something I'm good for covering. I think maybe stop by your local GameStop. That's my best recommendation sooner than later. Moving on here. Shadow of Nexus. DLSS is hardware based, not software. Yes. Now earlier I think we were talking about if there would need to be patches. So there would need to be patches, but only for hardware that supports it, right? So it wouldn't work on like base Switch games or Switch Lite, or probably not even Switch Oled. So that's just something to put out. Nishant Kelkar. Tooth Fairy exists. His name is Dwayne The Rock Johnson. Maybe. Nishant Kelkar. Not really game related, but what are your favorite movies? Great question. There's a lot of movies that I've liked over the years. Whenever people ask me, there are a few that come to mind pretty quickly. There's a lot of movies I enjoy, so these aren't like the only ones, but they are kind of the ones that sort of jump out initially. How to Train Your Dragon, the first one, absolutely loved. I love the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I love the Dark Knight trilogy. And I love Kill Bill's Volume 1 and 2. I love Pulp Fiction. Those are some of my top ranked movies, but there's a lot out there that are really good. So I don't want to say those are the only ones. There's a lot of movies I've enjoyed over time, but those are some of my favorites. Paul Dunn. Andres, what is your favorite soda? Coca-Cola. Like just basic Coca-Cola. I used to really love Mountain Dew Code Red, but nowadays it just feels like way too syrupy for me. And I'm not here trying to say that, oh, I try not to drink soda that much. I drink soda. I do try and drink more water more often nowadays, but I still like enjoying a Coke, for sure. But yeah, Coca-Cola is my favorite. I like having it like in a glass with a few like rocks or like cubes of ice. That's great. I do not really love rum and Coke just because I feel like the rum dilutes too much from the Coke and the Coke dilutes too much from the rum. So that is something, but in terms of just drinking pure soda, Coca-Cola is my favorite. Let's see, my chat jumped again, so I lost my positioning. Okay, I didn't get to this. I didn't see this question. Benjamin W. Since we saw the Bokoblins riding a Talus in recent Breath of the Wild 2 trailer, it seems that they may be onto the same idea as the apocalyptic mode in Age of Calamity DLC. Would that seem fun to you? I guess I haven't seen the apocalyptic mode in Age of Calamity DLC, so I'm not sure what exactly are you referring to there. I only played through the main campaign, so maybe I missed what that is. But I do love the concept of Bokoblins riding on the Talus. You know, like I want to see more interaction of different Breath of the Wild creatures with each other. Like there were some cool ones in the base game, right? Like you could see some of the bigger enemies throw some of the smaller enemies, which is hilarious. So if they develop more sort of interactions like that, different things they could do, that'd be very exciting. So what happens when you get on the actual like base of the bokoblins that's on top of the talus. Will the talus react to that in any way while you're on top of it? Will it drop down? Will that cause the bokoblins to fall off? That's some potential cool interactions that could be there. So there's a lot of different ways that can sort of expand upon those gameplay possibilities. All right, moving on. All right, so we've done this for about 2 hours. So I think I'm not calling it quits quite yet, but I'm saying I'm ending it within about 15 minutes. So if you guys have any final questions or points, put them out there, and then I'll try to kind of get through as many as I can. Joseph Stewart, hey Andres, what leaker spoilers do you recommend following for reliable news? So, it's tough because I feel like in general, you don't get like the full course of information from any particular person, and I feel like literally every single leaker or rumor giver will sometimes be wrong, but I'll tell you that I like listening to Jeff Grubb. Jeff Grubb's great. He writes for VentureBeat, so I do like seeing that. I also like I do pay attention to Samus Hunter, but I'm not saying Samus Hunter is the most reliable. Maybe like none of them are right. Like they all get things wrong, but I guess the point is like Samus Hunter tries to be an actual leaker. Jeff Grubb is just a journalist, right? Who talks about things he hears and speculates, right? I think Jeff Grubb offers a lot of really good perspective. Samus Hunter has a decent track record. Some things wrong, some things right. The things they've said, I feel like to me are suggestive of that they have knowledge on Nintendo's marketing plans. So that's kind of interesting to me. Nate the Hate also, I believe, has inside information as well. They've talked about the Donkey Kong and Metroid things for quite some time, and I think both of those things are also real. It lines up with things I've heard, so I think they're pretty good. So yeah, Nate the Hate's pretty good. Jeff Grubb's pretty good. I personally like listening to Samus Hunter. Some people, for some reason, it's like divisive to suggest that, but the track record speaks for itself. I'd say it's pretty solid. Not perfect. Literally, no one's perfect, right? But those are some that I sort of like look to in terms of like hearing about information before it's been announced yet. Give me 1 second. I want to let my cat in, and he's crying. He wants me inside. Let me just show you something. Give me a second here. And then I'll try and conclude the chat. Yeah, give me a second. Okay, I'm back. It was just a second. So let's see here. Yeah, so yeah, we're gonna try and get towards the end here. So final, I don't want to say, I guess final call for questions. Let's see, there's a lot. So Noah 45 Kings Arnos, have you watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? I'm not sure. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Oh, that's relatively new. Have I seen it? I don't think I have. No, I haven't seen it. It's a Tarantino film. Oh, I probably should watch that. Thank you for the recommendation. Yeah, I definitely want to check that one out. Noah 45 Kings. Any hopes for Donkey Kong's anniversary? So my hopes are we get a Donkey Kong 99 and we get a trailer showing off the next Donkey Kong game to come out 2022. Those are my hopes, and it comes around the September Direct. Everyday Gamer, I don't like the white Switch. How about you? I do like the white Switch. I really want it. Gaina X01. What are the Donkey Kong rumors? Basically, just more of the same. The rumors are suggesting that both a Fire Emblem remake and a Donkey Kong are nearly complete, which I agree with. I think both are near done, and we can see both of them next year. we'll see. Nintendo's been holding off a lot of things, so they might hold them back even more, especially with COVID and all. But I feel like it's a good chance we can see them next year. At least one of them, for sure. Maybe both. And then there's also some rumor about animation, like an animation, like maybe like a movie or a TV show for Donkey Kong. And the idea is to sort of build up the franchise similar to how Mario is. But personally, I'm not going to really buy into that. I think we should first worry about seeing a Mario movie before we get a Donkey Kong one. I'm not saying that it can't be in the works, but I think we haven't even seen the Mario movie yet. So I'm going to wait until I see the Mario movie first before I start sort of speculating on other things. I would love to see something from Donkey Kong, right? But there's not even like a new Donkey Kong game right now. So it's just kind of like a lot of leaps. And it could all be a big part of Nintendo's plan, like there's a Donkey Kong expansion to the Universal Park and things of that nature. But it's just, I'll wait for the Mario movie before I start to speculate upon, and a Donkey Kong game release before I start, and also the Donkey Kong Park before I start to really jump into like Donkey Kong like movie or show animation, unless there's more evidence that presents itself. And Joshua Ayers, Oranges, when do you think folders are coming to Switch? Maybe never. I'm sorry to say. I mean, it could happen, but there's just like no evidence to suggest when it'll happen. Not that I've seen, at least. Regal Riker, hey Andres, do you think if the Advance Wars remake sells well, the series will be revived? Yeah, I do. I'm not saying it'll happen like immediately, but I think if it performs, it doesn't have to sell like millions of copies. If it just sells like 500,000 to 1 million, I think that might be enough for them to go and do another one. Hopefully it does a little bit better than that, but yeah, I think there's definitely some potential there. Where 3 Crazy, Bloomberg reported on 2 new Switch models this year. Did they? Is that a recent report? I haven't seen that yet. I don't believe that. Now at this point. Curious Sword, Nintendo UK states that you can dock the OLED Switch into the regular Switch dock. If that's the case, that's great. That is great. Nintendo, have you seen Pacific Rim? I didn't like the sequel, but the first one was good. Is that the one with like giant robots fighting? Yeah, I saw that. The first one, at least. Everyday Gamer, will Mario get a game based on the movie? No, I don't think so. I mean, anything I think just a Mario movie related to the Mushroom Kingdom is enough. Doesn't need to be anything beyond that to sort of link a Mario game and movie. Maybe there's a character they introduce in there and it somehow shows off in some sort of other Mario game, but I don't really think that's at all needed. Nintendo, Omeka Ridley in Metroid Dread really doesn't have to be in the game, but it'd be epic to see a version of him in the first ever HD Metroid game plus a new theme. Ridley, to some capacity, is usually in every Metroid game. I think there's a good chance we see Ridley. It just seems like the thing to do. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, we saw, like, Scorpius, right? Which I think is a cool-looking boss. And that's just, like, presumably, like, pretty much the beginning of the game. Now my cat is demanding I let him out. But, we're almost done, buddy. Can you please just let me finish the stream? No? No? Relax. Yeah, he's just gonna whine. There he is, just whining. He wants me to let him out. Original report was 2 new Switches in 2021. Yeah, I'll look for some reports, but at this point, considering how late into the game we are, I don't think that's likely. Taker 610, Switch OLED $349.99, LG C177 OLED $349.99. Coincidence? Yes, a coincidence could be. Yeah. Super Chris, do you plan to get Metroid Dread on its release? I do, Chris. I absolutely plan on getting Metroid Dread immediately. Immediately. I am so excited for that game. I cannot wait. Very excited. But anyways, guys, thanks for coming by. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this Q&A, if you would like to see Q&As in conjunction with the podcast on Sundays. Like, maybe we still do the podcast on Sundays, and then at some point in the week we still do kind of like a Q&A. And we still have the videos, right? Like, if you guys would like to see that, let me know in the comments. But this was good. Thanks for coming by, everyone. If you could leave a like, that'd be appreciated. If you haven't seen me before, maybe consider subscribing. And stay tuned. Things are coming. Have a good one. Bye.